Welcome back to the Chronically Positive Podcast. Sorry, it's been a while since I've been here because, chronic illness kind of gets in the way. So we had a little halt in our season, but we're back. And today I have two amazing people that I cannot wait to introduce you to. But first, if you're new here, welcome to the Chronically Positive Podcast. This is the podcast that is not about toxic positivity. It's not about, oh, you're chronically ill, just be positive and everything will be fine. No. This type of positivity is about, okay, well, I have a chronic illness, but what am I going to do? What has this taught me? What can I do with this? How can I give back to my community? So we are meeting people who are creating businesses, who are making art, who are becoming public speakers, people who are dancing from their wheelchairs. So that's what this show is about. Some of you may be wondering, where have you been? What have you been up to? I've been doing some things. I went to Las Vegas to the Healthcare Advocate Summit where I spoke on a panel as a patient voice about my experience in the healthcare system. And this conference is so important. Independent patient advocates, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare workers, all these people coming together to try to help fix the system. There was a husband and wife who had a son who went to the pharmacy to pick up his inhaler that he, on prescription that he always gets. And he went to pick it up, and I think it was either $500 or $600, and he couldn't afford it. So he didn't buy it. And sadly, the next day, he passed away from an asthma attack. How can we prevent things like that happening? How can we make healthcare accessible? This conference wasn't about pointing fingers or blame. It's about how do we solve the problem? So that's what I've been up to. But now I'm so excited to introduce you to two amazing women who have created something absolutely amazing for the chronic illness and disability community. Two sisters, Jacqueline and Alexa, together they have created an app called Dateability. And Dateability is a dating app for people with disabilities. I cannot wait to dive in more, learn more. But first, please, if you could do me a favor at the end of the episode, if you could leave a review, it really helps get this podcast out to people who will benefit from these stories. Without further ado, let's meet Jacqueline and Alexa. Thank you for being on the show, Jacqueline and Alexa. I'm so happy you guys are here today.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so excited to learn about Dateability, but I would love to know about some background about how it came to be.
Yeah, the journey to Dateability was a personal one, which I feel like those ones are always like the best and the most rewarding. And it began when I was about 14 and I became disabled due to chronic illnesses. And then, I had a fairly typical social life in high school, and then in college I really kind of began to see the effects of having a disability. And then once I graduated college and I entered the real world, I really saw how people viewed disabled people, especially in dating. And
Absolutely.
I would, I joined the apps and I was home alone, at home a lot, and managing my health. And so figured the dating apps would be a great way to meet people. But when they would find out that I had a disability, it would, never work out. They'd either ghost or say something really offensive. And it was really difficult. It really affected my self-esteem. I really just hated who I was and what I had become. And I wasn't living the life I thought I was going to live, especially as a 22-year-old.
Right.
And so that period of, dark and loneliness lasted for a couple years. And then in 2021, I had to get a feeding tube for gastroparesis. And that sort of kicked in the anxiety even more. I was like, how are people going to react to me getting a feeding tube when, they already see me as being this alien and this person who can't do anything. If I add in food to the mix, what's going to happen? And Alexis just suggested that we start our own dating app because there was nothing out there. And that's exactly what we did.
Wow. So my next question was, how did you become a sister team?
I had talked about wanting an inclusive space, dating space before. And I guess I was just like, let's stop talking about it and let's do it. That's kind of how I live my life. I am the older sister, so that's pretty normal for me to be like, this is what we're going to do. And you're going to come along for the ride. It was 2021, so it was still the beginning of COVID, but we'd been in this like chaos for a year. I had lost my job at the time due to COVID budget cuts, and so I was also looking for some kind of purpose and direction and structure, and so it was just a really good time to do this together. And I was worried about the feeding tube stuff. I was unfazed by the majority of Jacqueline's health complications and disabilities just because I'm used to them.
Yeah.
But the feeding tube was going to be a real lifestyle change. And, we loved to go out to brunch together. I would cook dinner for both of us, and I didn't know how life would look with this feeding tube. And so I was like, guys that are already shitty to Jacqueline on the apps, they're probably going to have a really hard time wrapping their heads around this. And so there were a bunch of different factors, but that finally made me say, okay, let's do this.
Amazing. So are you on the app yourself? Have you gone on dates? What has the experience been? If you don't mind me asking, I'm so curious.
Really ironic because now like I have founded this space and this platform, I'm too busy to like, think about dating, which is nice because now it's on my terms.
Right.
And I'm like single by choice. And like before I honestly would have gone out with like anyone who asked me because I was so desperate and just like I just wanted to feel that sense of normalcy. And so it kind of feels nice to like feel like I am in a place where I can be like equals with everyone.
Yeah.
And I have my choices.
I love that. And then when you're ready, you have an amazing space to
Exactly.
dive into. That's awesome. So this is something that a lot of my followers ask me about dating. Like, how did you find your person? No one understands me. And luckily, well, I don't think it's luckily, and I think that it doesn't often work out, but I started dating the guy that I'm dating before I got really sick. So that wasn't even like on the table. And I'm very blessed that he has stuck around and he's been so supportive. But for people who aren't in a relationship, who are looking for love, it's so stressful and scary and definitely makes you feel defeated and alone. And I cannot tell you how many comments I get, like, how do you do it? Well, and a lot of them they break my heart. They say, like, I'll never find love like this. And it's like, no, like, it's out there and it may be with somebody who knows exactly what you're going through. So what you've created is exactly what this community needs.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in that position before where I just was so hopeless and I was like, people would either tell me like, they'd go on one spectrum, like, I can't believe you haven't found anyone yet. And that would sort of, minimize what I had gone through. And then other people would be like, oh, well, it's going to take someone really special to love you and like to date you. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. That's not really what I wanted to hear.
No.
But, and I had this thought, probably back in like around 2018 where I questioned whether or not I wanted to date someone else with a chronic illness. And my first instinct was no.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I pictured dating someone like me, saying, oh my God, our lives would be so depressing and it would be boring and we would just be sitting there and how am I going to be able to take care of someone else if I need someone to take care of me? And then I through a lot of therapy work, like realized that it was all internalized ableism, and the way I was looking at other people with chronic illness was exactly how those guys on the dating apps were looking at me, and it really wasn't fair. And throughout this journey of creating Dateability, we've really come to learn that like disability is just so diverse. So yes, like there can be these logistical things that like barriers and compatibility barriers and accommodation conflicts that come into play, but disability is so diverse that there is someone else in the disability community who you can absolutely find something to relate to and have a connection with.
And I think that as you grow, like I'm not disabled, but if I get married and I grow old with somebody, the chances of us becoming disabled together are pretty likely. And so I don't really, I think it's so short-sighted to look at somebody if you're not disabled and look at someone who is disabled and say like, oh, I don't want that, because that's coming for all of us. If we are lucky enough to live that long, disability will probably get us one way or the other. And even if it's just old age.
Exactly. Whether you have a disability or not, finding a partner who, if one day you become disabled, I mean, we could wake up tomorrow, get in a car accident, and be paralyzed from the chest down. Like, we're not robots. We are so susceptible to change in our bodies that finding a partner who knows that that's a possibility and is able to take that on is so important. But with knowing you have a disability and being able to go into this space with the mindset of not having to worry about what is this person going to see, how much do I have to tell them about my disability, I'm sure to see like a weight like lifted, like going into this space.
Yeah, and that's what we've heard, because that was one thing that I really struggled with, is figuring out how to tell someone that I was disabled. And, like many people, I have invisible disabilities. And so my dating profile didn't necessarily mention anything. And even if we went out for coffee, it potentially could never come up. And so it was really anxiety inducing to be like, all right, how much do I tell them? When do I tell it? Do I say it before the first date? Do I wait, a month before I tell them, and then maybe like risk them accusing me of lying, and playing them? And so to combat that, we really wanted to make disclosure just like easy and natural and neutral, and have it be a part of us, like it is a part of us. And so we created the Dateability Deet section, which you can just like tick off a box that says chronic illness, immunocompromised, mobility impairment, neurodivergent. And so it just really just puts it out there in a neutral manner.
Yeah, I was going to ask about like what kind of features it offers that may differ from like your typical dating app.
Yeah, we recently relaunched the app, and it has major accessibility improvements, which we're really proud of. We are really on track to becoming the most accessible dating app out there, and we want to make sure that it's screen reader compliant and that everyone can use it. We have image descriptions on each profile. Wow. The Dateability Deet section. We also have a web app version that people can use on their desktop or laptop, which is really helpful. And then, of course, I think a big component is that we have a completely free and functional version. It's very robust. We don't limit like the amount of swipes someone can do, or messages they can send, and that was really important to us to make it economically accessible.
We do have a subscription version which has enhanced filtering and some enhanced features. We like to remind people this is a business, and Jacqueline, as a disabled person, deserves to be able to run a successful and profitable business. But we don't want money and financial situations to be a barrier to finding love. And so, we took the things we liked from other apps, the things we hated, and then left out the things we hated from the other apps when designing this. And then, like Jacqueline said, we just totally scrapped and rewrote the code and just relaunched a couple weeks ago. And it made it much more screen reader compliant, much more sophisticated. It doesn't read like a medical chart. It's fun and it's modern, and it's, everything that we think our community deserves.
That's amazing. So for people who aren't necessarily looking for romantic relationships, is there a friendship option?
One day we do want to create a completely separate friendship option. Right now there's a looking for section, and you can put friendship in there. Okay. A lot of people do have that. And I think that the people on our app are pretty accommodating and accepting and well-intentioned. I can't guarantee that everyone's a good person, but I do think that everyone's coming from a place where they were discriminated against, or they were afraid of being discriminated against on the other apps, and so they understand, and it's just more accepting. And so people are cool with just looking for friends. I haven't heard any complaints about that. And so that's been really nice. So yes, if you wanted to download the app yourself, just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean you can't, because you might be looking just for other girlfriends.
Yeah, and we see that a lot. And there's also like a very big intersectionality between the LGBTQ and the disability community. And so we have people who are, asexual, looking for that type of connection and friendship, and of course, just any type of connection, casual, monogamous, open
Polyamorous, yeah.
Amazing. Is there anything that you guys would love to share that you would love the community to know?
Success stories?
Yeah, let's hear some success stories.
We have had a lot of success stories, which has been really fun. And it just is proof that you don't need to have like 10 million users on a platform for people to find love. And I actually think sometimes having a bigger user base is a hindrance, and it's just having that like community specific user base is more effective. And so we are celebrating our first wedding in February, which is really exciting. I'm really excited for them. They have completely different disabilities.
They didn't live in the same place either, did they?
And so they found love, and they are so excited to get married. We also have a lot of people who are just in like committed long-term relationships. One of our first success stories found each other within the first month of us launching. And so, there's like 1,000 people on the app, but they connected. They lived 900 miles apart, and they're still together. So they'll be celebrating their 3-year anniversary soon. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think community-specific apps are the future. If you think about the way our parents and grandparents met, they didn't have like 1,000 people, 1,000 potential suitors to choose from. Yeah. And whenever I go on Hinge, I am just overwhelmed by the number of options. And I think that you can either be overwhelmed by it, or then you're like tempted by it, and you're waiting for the next best thing, and you're never satisfied because you think the grass is always greener. Both of those feelings really kind of prevent you from finding a genuine relationship and genuine connection. And so I think community-specific apps are the way to go. There's a diverse enough user base so that you can get enough diversity, and there's something for everybody. Yeah. There's also like common ground that everyone has, and I think it just makes connecting easier.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I actually met my boyfriend on Hinge, but it felt like such an overwhelming space. And I just felt like, obviously you don't know somebody when you're swiping through, but I just felt like I was just looking at like just nobodies. And then like when you go to a space where it's like a community, it's like you already have this connection with this person that you don't even know yet, because you have this shared experience.
Yeah, and I think that's that's so important in dating, and dating in this era is really superficial. And of course, like at the end of the day, yes, we are still a dating app and we have pictures on our profile, but we want people to look beyond that and to find that real connection, and to compare values and just the things that truly matter when finding a relationship.
Yeah. So this whole podcast, I interview a lot of people with chronic illnesses who have created something like a business or a project because of it. What is it like being a chronically ill business owner?
Exhausting. But it's very rewarding. So I really struggled in my early 20s with my place in society. I had this whole plan for myself, and like I was graduating college, I wanted to be a child life specialist in a children's hospital, and I was getting my master's, and I really just like worked really hard to have that career, and illness derailed it, and it really just sent me into a spiral where I saw all my friends building their careers, and I saw them getting married and all that, those like big milestone moments, and it really sent me into this deep depression where I felt like I had nothing to to give the world. And so feeling like I have this purpose has really been so rewarding. I mean, I never felt like I was a part of the disability community before Dateability. And now being able to build something and find people that relate to me and that I can relate to and that we just like have so much in common with has been great. So I like almost created this like Dateability within my personal life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think good things come to those who wait. I always say that. And then I just saw something, I think it was on Reddit the other day, about how people are often in a rush to check off all the boxes, like all the important stages in life, have kids, get a job that you love. And someone told them, like, why the rush? Let's imagine you're 28 and you check off all those boxes. You're going to live for another 40, 50 years. Like, and then what? What are you doing for those next 40 or 50 years? What are you striving for? Where's, the motivation? And I'm not saying that that's, applies to everyone, but I think that it's a helpful reminder that, we're spending all these years working towards something. And just because we're not hitting these milestones in our 20s doesn't mean that we're not going to have fulfilled and whole lives. And I think that you're perfect proof of that.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to the chronic illness part, I think that having chronic illness and dealing with that from such a young age really has benefited the way that I run a business. I'm able to manage my time really well, just setting my expectations for myself and for other people, and just like the way that we communicate with others and our goals. It really, I do feel like being chronically ill benefited me in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. For people who are chronically ill or disabled or who want to start a business, what advice do you have?
Oof. I would say, well, you got to go for it and you have to execute. We hear of so many people, disabled or not, with these ideas, and then you just sit on them, and eventually someone else will come out with it, and you'll regret not doing it. So like take the plunge, and some advice, like you'll feel really exhausted and you'll feel really tired, but figure out how to manage both. Rest is productive, but sometimes you're going to have to lose those 2 hours of sleep to get on a meeting. And so it's just really important to get your priorities.
Yeah.
It's all about balance. I mean, this morning I played hooky and left at like 8:30 in the morning and took our dog on a hike. And then, I come back around lunchtime and I'm here and I'm doing work. And so balance is helpful. I think executing. I will say I think people realize it's a lot harder to execute than they think.
Yeah.
Especially from the financial side. And so I think what's important is finding, I mean, I guess people can do it alone, but finding a partner a business partner you can rely on and trust and that complements your skills really well is important. I have a lot of ideas. I'm a big thinker. I have lofty dreams, but I don't always know how to go about achieving them. And so I will just tell Jacqueline, like, this is, like, ideally, this is what I want. And, she can tell me how we can make it happen or, or not. But if I'm being wild and not rooted in reality, if I'm being delusional. But a lot of times, I'm like, this would be a really good idea. What do you think? And then she'll help execute it. Or really good at the social media graphic stuff, and I'm a lawyer, and so business, finances, legal stuff is where I thrive. And so together, we make a perfect pair, and we're also really open with each other. So when she's having an off day, if I need to pick up the slack, that's fine. If I'm in a day full of meetings with my other job, I just tell her that, and she can, take over. And so I can't imagine doing this alone.
Yeah, same.
I don't think it happens.
And I will say, on that note, like, hustle culture is so toxic, and I hate it so much. And people will, and like especially in the business startup founder world, people will just like pound the idea that if you are not up at all hours of the night, then you are not working hard enough. And as people who prioritize sleep, we can tell you that we sleep and work hard, but like we will never choose like exhaustion over rest and our health,
because your brain doesn't function.
Yeah.
Even when I was in college, if I had a final, I would always get at least 6 hours of sleep, because I was like, I could stay up all night studying and then I'm not going to remember anything during the final because I'm exhausted and I didn't sleep. Like,
Right.
my recall will be better if I sleep. And so I instilled that early on. And then obviously going through law school, it's super similar. That's like where there's that at its prime. And so I was like, no, I need to sleep. I need to like watch an episode of Bravo before I go to bed. I need to give myself time to decompress. And so I think, yes, we work our asses off and we rarely have an entire day off. We're working, but we do sleep. Like, we're not eating ramen and like if we have sleeping in our office, like we hear that and I'm just like, that is not glamorous. Like, that's toxic.
Yeah. You have to have balance.
Yeah. Don't buy into hustle culture.
So piggybacking off of you were saying earlier, so Alexa, working with your sister and working with someone with a chronic illness, is there any insights that you can share? You know, a lot of people, not sure if they're going to be listening, but I work with people who do not have disabilities or chronic illnesses. I would love to hear like your side and what you've learned and what the experience is like for you. And I know you've grown up together and before you've been with each other dealing with chronic illness, but on the business side, what has that been like for you?
I think it helps that we run our own business. Like, you can do things from your bed. So if you need to be horizontal and working, you're able to do that. And I don't care where you work. I like don't believe in return to office stuff either. I'm like, wherever, as long as you're happy and as long as it gets done.
Yep.
But it's been nice to like watch her finally have a purpose and feel like she belongs. And I always knew she belonged and had a purpose, but for her to realize that herself has been really nice to see. I think people just need to. Communication is key. People need to communicate.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of assumptions that people make, or they're afraid they're going to offend people, and like maybe you will, but I really think that if you're well intentioned and you didn't like mean to be malicious, people will get over it. And
or an apology goes a long way.
Right. So I will say stuff sometimes that will upset Jacqueline, and I think she knows that I didn't mean it like that. I'm just in a moment of ignorance, and I'll apologize. And I think that goes for coworkers too.
Yeah.
Ask questions. If you don't ask, you're never going to know, and then you're making assumptions, and I think that like it never ends up well.
Yeah.
So ask the question, and if the person's offended, like everyone will move on. But I think it's better to ask than remain silent and just like create a narrative in your head about what's going on.
Absolutely. And I have definitely dealt with those difficulties in the workspace, and just being transparent on my end has been the most helpful thing. All right, so we're coming towards the end of the episode. Where can we find you on socials, on the App Store?
So you can download the app on the App Store, on iOS or Google, and then at dateabilityapp.com, that's our web app version. And then on socials, on Instagram, Dateability app, Facebook, Dateability app, and on TikTok, at Dateability. And we're really active on there. We love connecting with the community, and
we love feedback. I will say, sometimes I think that the expectations are a little unfair. I think people think that we're like Facebook or Instagram. We have a really small team. We have a limited budget, but we're like so dedicated to this. I will say that TikTok, one of the TikTok engineers I heard through the grapevine, like didn't even know what a screen reader was.
Wow.
So, and that's TikTok, right? So we're trying to do the best we can with as little as we can. And I think we're doing a really good job. So we're open to feedback because, there just might be something that we're completely unaware of.
Yeah.
Also, disabilities, as we mentioned before, are so diverse. And everyone's abilities are different. And so, we can only account for what we know exists and are able to test. And so don't be afraid to like email us with constructive criticism.
Yeah.
We want to be the best.
Yeah, and we want to create a place that our community wants to be on.
Right.
And
actually uses.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you ever share success stories on social media?
Yeah, we do. And so
Okay.
they're on there. We have a highlight on our Instagram called Love Stories, and we have some of our success stories there. And so it's It is really like that is truly the best part. Even yesterday, we got a message saying from a dating coach who actually said that there is a Dateability romance budding in her program, and so I'm so excited for that. Like it's really the best.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Well, thank you both so much. This was such a lovely conversation, and I've loved getting to know both of you. You are both doing amazing work, and I'm just so happy to learn about you and what you're doing for the community. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. I love getting to speak to Jacqueline and Alexa. It is so empowering to hear stories about people with chronic illnesses coming up with these amazing ideas to benefit other people like themselves. These personal stories are what create the most amazing ideas. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, please leave a review, rate, subscribe, like, whatever platform that makes sense on. It really helps get these stories out to people who will benefit from them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember that your journey matters.